In 2015, the England team took third place at the Women's World Cup. This should have been an exciting encouragement for young women to enter the domain of football, a sport commonly dominated by men. Unfortunately, the trend of gender inequality continues.
Football is no exception to the other organization. It is again started from the selection, recruiting time, selection, and from there, at the point of promotion, the women are sometimes, most of the time, they are treated less favorable compared to their counterpart men.
According to research by the Football Association in 2015, 4 out of 5 girls don't feel confident in playing football, and 81% of girls think football is suitable only for boys. Another survey conducted among the female delegates of 171 countries shows that 63% of people observed gender discrimination in football, and 43% had personally experienced it. These stereotypes and gender imbalances traditionally seen in everyday life largely affect a woman's experience in football.
It's to do with the traditional thing where women, even up until the 60s, there were so many sports we weren't even allowed to play. So it started a later trend on for women to be able to play football. And then it's just from a young age as well, you meant to play with Barbies. My mom hated me playing football. She was like, "You're not a boy, why are you playing?" Because it's a rough sport, and they have the idea that women are meant to be delicate, we're not meant to do rough sports really.
Like my family and people I know, sometimes like when I was a kid, they would make me do like other things like joining the math club and stuff like that. They wouldn't let me do sports because they didn't like want me as a female playing sports, but I thought it was like a healthy thing to do instead of just sitting in a desk all day, to like do sports.
For example, I'll go to a pub, and if there's a women's playing football games, I hear all these guys saying how they should be home, cooking for their husbands, or look at them, they're so thin they can barely play, and things like that. It's just the idea that we are unable to play as good as them, or we should be doing other things because of our sex, because we were born female, so we cannot do.
These ingrained stereotypes have hindered feminine football participation and young girls' involvement for many years.
I think it's probably a legacy thing, whereas men's football has existed for so much longer. So, I read recently that they're going to start a lingerie football, which detracts from the women's game.
I think it's just because of tradition. For a long time, especially in this country, a lot of people that have played football, it's usually guys. It was males that came up with the sport. I think I don't know if it was like Leeds or because in Sheffield they have like a really old football team, and they just base it around like males. They don't really think about females. And then when they have clubs for females, it's always like these small groups. It's just something they can do for fun. It's never something that they take seriously.
As English society progresses, people are becoming more open to gender equality. Unfortunately, stereotypes and gender maltreatment in women's football continue to exist, especially within social media and newspapers.
I think it's just, it's stupid. I don't think there's any reason to make people feel bad for playing a sport. I think, it's for everybody, If you look back in history, everybody used to play a sport. Maybe not football, but it's sort of the same thing, isn't it? You just try to play the game, and it doesn't really matter if you're female or male.
There's been several high-profile examples of sexist behaviour towards women in modern football. One obvious one was there was a sort of scandal at Sky Sports, a very big broadcaster of football recently, a few years ago, where their main presenter was caught on camera and on tape making a lot of disparaging and sexist comments about women, even at one point to one of his colleagues.
In order to minimize this gender maltreatment, society needs to uncover the unconscious base of sexism and discriminatory interaction within women's football.
It's a long game. You know, men's football's been established over 100 years. Some of these clubs are over 100 years old. So I do hear complaints, oh, we're not getting enough coverage, but I think we've got to see the bigger picture. The women's game is doing a lot better than it was.
It's not as developed as the men's game. Like, if we went ahead 50 years into the future, who's to say it can't be as big as the men's game? It all depends on what women's football does, like, in that period of time. Like, you got to stay established, you know, stay in the public eye.
These stereotypes continue to envelope today's modern world.
Social media and the nasty things that happen on social media is a sort of snapshot. It's a tester. It's a taste of general attitude. So you get horrendous things going on social media, and a lot of the professional players I've seen, the female professional players, have talked about, you know, in their Twitter accounts, even England players, why are we still getting this abuse in this day and age? It is a minority, but unfortunately it does reflect a sort of nastiness that is out there lurking, and this is what I mean about the clash between the old world where females weren't involved in football and go away, you know, it's all a men's game, and the new world where actually it's for everybody, and that nastiness is still there, and it will take a long time for that to go.
An old world view is continued through corporate investment bias.
Is the technique, the quality is a bit higher in men's, but I do think it's a lot to do because they do invest so much more money in men's football. So they start from from 5, because they know they can make so much money out of it. So like they start investing, and the teams are much better. The salary, the pay difference is much bigger in between women's and men's football, and because of that, it's just better. It's more entertaining to watch.
If you look at the corruption things that are going on with FIFA right now, and the involvement that Coca-Cola and McDonald's and Adidas have, if they were to put as much in the women's game, even a percentage of what they put into the men's game, then it will develop the game a lot more in terms of pitches that they're able to get and coaching that they're able to provide and pay for. The women's game is massively underpaid. It's like one or two proper good leagues, and then everything else is quite semi-pro amateur football.
Contemporary reception fortunately extend beyond the Women's World Cup to battle these outdated stereotypes.
One thing the media can do is cover more women's sport, because the more it's covered, the more people are interested. And I think the World Cup was really well covered. But if you want to get people interested in women's football and women's sport, then you need to cover it more. So that's probably the one thing that the media could do.
If you look at the number of elite teams that are getting decent crowds now for women's football, that's an indication that, first of all, people want to go and watch it, but secondly, it's been promoted, because, you know, no one's going to go and watch anything if it's not promoted, whether it's a music band or a TV show. So I do feel that the football authorities and the broadcasting companies like the BBC and Sky are doing a better job of promoting women's football.
Despite a growing social acceptance of women's football involvement, the battle against stereotypes must stem from within.
I think at the grassroots level there needs to be more games, just lots of more teams, and you get that with developing more teams and from the school age, developing sports, and developing people's ability, developing people's desire to want to play, and then from there, from the grassroots, so you get more coaching involved, and that's women's coaching as well as men's coaching. Men can coach women. Women can coach men's football as well. There's not an issue there.
There should be more women in prominent positions in football, definitely, because they need to represent the sort of modern world. There is a lady called Heather Rabbits who's very senior at the FA, and she has been making some pretty, at times, sort of strong arguments about football's attitude to women, how it needs to change. There's also a very successful football agent called Rachel Anderson, who's a woman. So it's gradually changing. I think in 10 years' time, you'll see a lot more women involved at senior levels.
These progressive women authorities can depend on English judicial support.
Equality of women is a gender issue, and which was incorporated into Sex Discrimination Act 1975 to protect the interest of the women, it was further enhanced in 1986, and now it is incorporated into Equality Act of 2010. It is further enhanced into Harassment Act 1997 to protect the freedom and of the women to work in a safe environment at a workplace. So the people who, the male gender, cannot force them to do some act which is to beyond their that they cannot feel comfortable about it.
Many sexist issues still occur under the radar because of a complex reporting system.
The individual woman who experiences some kind of sexist behaviour has a difficult situation in terms of, do they report it, who do they report it to, what are the consequences for them. So obviously in general we should be reporting any sexist behaviour, but the individual woman sometimes, I feel, for example, if they're working within a club, let's say, I don't know, a player or a manager or someone quite senior in a club behaved in a sexist way to them, perhaps that woman or that female employee would be worried about reporting this high-profile person. So I still feel, and it's a gut feeling, that there needs to be more support, more obvious steps for someone who works within football or even football supporters to come forward. You know, so more promotion of sort of hotlines, email accounts, email addresses that you can report incidents to, things like that. I have noticed that Kick It Out, the organisation that mainly does racism but also does homophobia, they are talking a bit more about this, and they are reporting that actually there's not much sexism reported. Not that it doesn't go on, but perhaps women feel that, you know, that it's still not culturally a thing where you report it immediately. Whereas with racism, it's got to the point where it's normally reported, I would imagine. Certainly we get a lot of incidents reported in British football.
A progressive British attitude towards women's football after the World Cup in 2015, coupled with judicial laws and supportive organizations like Kick It Out and Women in Football, mirror the growing support of gender equality overall. Nevertheless, a plethora of steps is required to obtain a social balance.
I think football is sort of caught between two worlds. It's the old world, where you've had lots of examples of sort of old-style sexism, sort of stuff you would imagine would come through in the 1970s in the pub, and the new world. And the new world is women's football is booming, girls are getting the message, young girls playing now at school level, this sport's for you as well. You've got more media coverage of the women's professional and elite levels of the sport than ever before. And that's all really, really, really positive. But what you're also getting, as I mentioned before, is you get the odd bang, you get the odd sort of bang bad example of basically a pretty sort of prehistoric attitude and a very negative attitude towards women's place in football. So at the moment, we're seeing a clash between those two worlds, but overall, I see a positive trend.
I would say go and find out for yourself if it's predominantly for ways. If you get on a pitch and you feel like this is something you can do it. Don't let anyone tell you it's for someone else. It's not for them to decide. It's for you to decide. Go and play football. If you enjoy it, keep at it, and you never know how far it can take you.